The clock in the staff room of Bridgeport Elementary was stubbornly fixed on 6:30 p.m. The other teachers had abandoned the halls hours ago, their escape from the scent of industrial cleaner and youthful energy a daily ritual. I, however, remained, a red pen my only companion as I worked through a mountain of phonics worksheets. 30 papers for 30 little lives I was meant to be molding, all on a salary that felt like a cruel joke against the cost of my two-bedroom apartment. I was Clara Rossi, 26 years old, a widow for 2 years, and a single mother to the most wonderful 4-year-old boy on the planet, Leo. The math of my life was brutally simple. 1 income, 2 mouths to feed, and a mountain of student debt that grew more imposing each month. My phone vibrated against the worn laminate of the table. A message from my landlord. A PDF attached. The subject line read, "Lease renewal and rent adjustment." My stomach plummeted with a familiar, sickening lurch. I squeezed my eyes shut, took a deep breath, and shoved the last of the papers into my tote bag. The janitor would be locking up soon, and I still had to pick up Leo from Mrs. Gable's and catch the bus home. Except the bus had other plans. I reached the stop just in time to see the red taillights of the last number 8 bus merge into the stream of evening traffic. A gust of wind whipped a fine Chicago mist into my face, the diesel fumes a final insult. My last chance to avoid the 10-block trek through a part of the city that seemed to shed its civility with each passing street had just driven away. The drizzle thickened, plastering my hair to my scalp and seeping through the seams of my coat. I hugged my bag to my chest and walked faster, my cheap flats squelching on the wet pavement. That's when I heard the sound. It wasn't the angry wail of a child's tantrum, but the choked, terrified sobs that every parent dreads. The noise sliced through the rhythm of the rain, pulling me toward a dark slash of an alley between 2 derelict brick buildings. Every rational thought screamed at me to keep walking, to mind my own business in a neighborhood where looking away was a survival skill. But being a mother and a teacher had rewired my soul. A child was crying. I had to respond. He was huddled behind a rusted dumpster, a small figure trembling violently. He couldn't have been dark and dead. "My watch broke. Papa can't find me now." My heart ached. No child should have to speak of bad men with such matter-of-fact terror. "What's your name?" I asked gently. "Matteo," he sniffled. "Matteo DeLuca." The name was just a name to me then, melodic syllables from a frightened little boy. "I'm Clara, and I'm a teacher. I have a little boy too. My apartment is just a few blocks away. It's warm and dry. We can go there, and I can help you find your papa." He studied my face with an unnerving intensity, as if weighing my soul. Whatever he found there seemed to satisfy him. He gave a small, hesitant nod and let me take his hand. The walk to my building felt endless. Matteo's small hand gripped mine with surprising force, and I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, every shadow a potential threat. His fear was a contagion, seeping into my own bones. My building's lobby smelled of damp carpet and stale cooking, but it was warm. We climbed the 4 flights of stairs to my apartment, and Matteo's shivering grew worse now that he was out of the elements. Inside, I turned the radiator up as high as it would go and found him a dry set of Leo's pajamas. They were ridiculously small on him. The superhero print stretched tight across his thin frame, but they were warm. He looked so fragile, a little ghost haunting my cluttered living room. "Are you hungry?" I asked, already pulling a can of soup from the cupboard. He nodded, perching on the edge of my worn floral sofa. While the soup heated, he scanned my apartment. The towers of books, the finger paintings taped to the wall, the Lego creations scattered across the floor. A life lived on a budget, but a life full of love. "You really have a little boy," he said, pointing to a framed photo of Leo on the bookshelf. "I really do," I smiled, handing him a warm mug of tomato soup. "Now, about your papa. Do you know his phone number?" His face clouded over. "Papa said never to call the police. He said the bad men might be listening." The information landed with a thud. My eyes kept straying to the window. Around midnight, the cars appeared. They were large, black SUVs, their tinted windows reflecting the streetlights like obsidian eyes. They slid into place around my building silently, methodically, like predators staking out their territory. Their engines stayed on, puffs of exhaust ghosting in the damp air. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was no coincidence. They had found us. I checked the deadbolt on my door, then checked it again. It suddenly felt as flimsy as cardboard. Mateo slept on, blissfully unaware of the siege forming outside. I made a pot of coffee with trembling hands, knowing sleep was impossible. The world this boy belonged to was closing in, and I had no idea what the dawn would bring. The SUVs waited, patient and menacing. And so did I, the accidental guardian of a boy whose father could summon an army in the middle of the night. A father who could be a savior, or a monster, or something far more complicated. The knock came at precisely 7:15 a.m. 3 sharp, authoritative raps that vibrated through the floorboards, followed by a silence that felt heavy and expectant. On the sofa, where I'd eventually drifted into a fitful sleep, I sat bolt upright. In the other room, Mateo stirred, his impossibly blue eyes fluttering open. "Papa?" he whispered, his voice a fragile mix of hope and fear. I pressed a finger to my lips, signaling for him to stay put. The peephole revealed 2 men in dark, impeccably tailored suits standing in my hallway. They were not police. They were something else. Something that triggered a primal alarm deep inside me. The knock came again, louder this time. "Ma'am, we know you're in there," a voice called, laced with a distinct Italian accent. "We are here for the boy." Mateo's face was pale, but he didn't look terrified. He looked conflicted. "Stay right there," I mouthed to him, then called through the door. "Who are you?" "Assisting. We are friends of the family," the voice replied. "The boy's father sent us." I glanced back at Mateo, who was now sitting up. "Rossi, I am Marco Vescovi." He indicated his companion. "This is Silvio Gallo. We have come for Mateo." Before I could form a response, a small figure darted past me. "Uncle Marco!" Mateo launched himself at the older man, who caught him in a hug that seemed both powerful and gentle. "Hey, little man," Marco murmured, his voice thick with relief. "Your papa has been beside himself. We've been searching all night." "I got scared," Mateo said, his voice muffled against Marco's expensive coat. "The bad men came, and Papa told me to run. Then I got lost, and my watch broke, and this nice teacher lady found me." Marco's gaze shifted to me, his eyes assessing, calculating. I felt transparent under his scrutiny, as if he could see my overdue bills, my anxieties about Leo, my entire life laid bare in the humble surroundings of my small apartment. "Miss Rossi," he said, his tone formal now, "Mateo's father wishes to express his gratitude in person." Just then, new footsteps sounded in the hall, slower, more deliberate, each one resonating with an authority that made both Marco and Silvio subtly straighten their posture. And then he was in my doorway. Alessandro De Luca was not what I had pictured. He was younger than Marco, maybe in his late 30s, and possessed a presence so intense it seemed to suck the air from the room. His dark hair was threaded with silver at the temples, and his eyes were the same startling blue as his son's, but colder, harder, as if they had witnessed violence and learned to command it. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than my car, tailored to a physique that was clearly powerful beneath the fine wool. A thin white scar sliced through his left eyebrow, a permanent mark of some past conflict. But it was his stillness that was most unnerving. He simply stood there, absorbing every detail. Me, my apartment, my son's toys scattered on the floor, with the quiet patience of a predator. Papa! Matteo wriggled free from Marco's grasp and ran to his father. Alessandro scooped him up effortlessly, and for a moment, the icy hardness in his expression thawed hip as he reached inside his jacket. I flinched, but he produced a wallet, not a weapon. For your kindness to my son, please, allow me to compensate you. He held out a roll of $100 bills thick enough to erase my rent increase and then some. The money felt like a test. I don't want your money, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. He's a child. Anyone would have done the same. A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps respect, crossed his face. Not anyone, he said quietly. Most people would have kept walking, or they would have called the police. He paused. You didn't. Why? I looked at Matteo, who was watching us with wide, curious eyes, then back at his father. Because he was scared and alone. Because he's 6 years old. Because that's what you do. Alessandro studied me for another long moment before tucking the money away. In its place, he produced a heavy cream-colored business card. My personal number, he said, holding it out. If you ever find yourself in need of anything at all. I took the card, my fingers trembling slightly. The paper was warm from his body, and I could feel the immense weight of the promise it represented. Favors from men like him were never free. Thank you, I managed, for taking care of him. Thank you, he corrected, for getting to him first. He settled Matteo more securely in his arms and turned to leave, Marco and Silvio falling into formation around him. At the door, he paused and looked back. Miss Rossi, he said, his voice low and resonant. If you reconsider the compensation, or if any other need arises, do not hesitate. And then they were gone. I stood in my doorway until the sound of their footsteps faded, then rushed to the window. 3 black SUVs were idling at the curb. Alessandro slid into the back of the middle one with Matteo. Within seconds, the convoy pulled away, vanishing into the morning traffic as if they had never been there. The only proof was the business card in my wide with curiosity. The delivery man was very insistent. I had to sign for them. The card was the same heavy cream stock as the one in my jewelry box. The script was elegant and bold. Miss Rossi, I would be honored if you would join me for dinner this evening. 7 p.m., the Cape Cod Room at the Drake Hotel. ADL. My hands trembled. The Drake. I'd walked past its stately entrance 1,000 times, but stepping inside was an idea as foreign as space travel. That was a world for a different kind of person. A world inhabited by men like Alessandro De Luca. A secret admirer? The secretary asked, her voice alight with the promise of gossip. Something like that, I mumbled, hiding the card in my pocket. My first instinct was to throw the flowers away, to ignore the invitation, to do anything that would keep me safely within the borders of my own complicated but predictable life. Instead, I found myself standing in front of my closet that evening, staring at a collection of clothes that suddenly felt hopelessly inadequate. My only option was a simple black dress I hadn't worn since my sister's wedding. It was classic, but I'd lost weight in the 2 years since my husband died, and it hung on me now. A reminder of a different life. I was still debating whether to go when my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. The Chicago Public Schools Board is finalizing budget cuts. Bridgeport Elementary is on the list for significant staff reductions. I thought you should know. ADL. A chill washed over me. Staff reductions meant layoffs. It meant losing the job I loved, the job that barely kept me and Leo afloat, but which we couldn't survive without. How did he know that? A second text arrived almost immediately. Dinner may present an opportunity to discuss alternatives. It wasn't a threat, not exactly. It was more subtle, more insidious. It was Alessandro De Luca demonstrating his reach, letting me know he possessed the power to shatter my world or to save it. The choice was mine. I put on the black dress. The Drake Hotel was a world of hushed elegance. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto polished marble floors, and the air hummed with the quiet confidence of old money. I felt like a accepting, he replied, his eyes holding mine. I wasn't sure you would. Your text was compelling, I admitted. A small, knowing smile touched his lips. You're direct. I find that refreshing. The dinner that followed was an exercise in controlled power. Alessandro ordered for us both in flawless Italian, selecting dishes and wines that cost more than my weekly budget for groceries. But it was the conversation that truly unnerved me. He knew about my degree in early childhood education. He knew my husband Marco had been a firefighter who died in a warehouse fire 2 years ago. He knew the exact balance of my student loans and the name of the after-school program Leo attended. You've done your homework, I said, placing my fork down carefully. I'm thorough, he replied, when it comes to people who interest me. Why would I interest you? I helped your son, that's all. Alessandro leaned back, studying me with those unnerving blue eyes. You're intelligent, compassionate, and you possess an integrity that is exceedingly rare. You chose to help a terrified child when it would have been far easier and safer to walk away. That tells me a great deal about your character. And that matters to you because Matteo needs someone like you in his life. He needs stability. He needs a guide who understands how a child's mind works. Someone who can help him navigate a world that is complicated. He swirled the wine in his glass. His mother passed away 3 years ago. Since then, he has been surrounded by bodyguards and housekeepers. People who see to his physical needs, but cannot address his emotional ones. The mention of his wife was brief, but the flicker of pain in his eyes was genuine and deep. I'm sorry for your loss, I said quietly. Elena was a light, he said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. When she died, that light went out for both of us. Matteo has nightmares. He is brilliant, but he is isolated. He needs someone who can reach him. You want to hire me as his tutor? I want you to consider it. 3 sessions a week. The compensation would be enough to eliminate your debt from an anonymous benefactor. Someone to ensure staffing levels remain high and programs are fully funded. It was a quid pro quo, plain and simple. Help his son, and he would save my school, my job, my colleagues' jobs. This feels like coercion, I said, but the word lacked force. This is mutual benefit, he countered smoothly. I am offering you an opportunity to do what you love, free from financial worry, while helping a child who desperately needs you. What is coercive about that? We both knew it was more than that. An arrangement with Alessandro De Luca was an entanglement, a debt that could be called in at any time. But as I sat there, watching the candlelight play across his handsome, severe features, I knew I was already caught. It wasn't his money or his power. It was the raw grief in his voice when he spoke of his wife, the fierce love he so clearly had for his son, and the unsettling way he looked at me, as if I were something precious, not disposable. 3 months, I heard myself say, a trial period. If it doesn't work for any of us, I walk away, no strings attached. Alessandro's smile was slow and satisfied, as if he had known my answer all along. 3 months, he agreed, raising his glass. To new arrangements. I touched my glass to his, sealing a pact that felt like a step into another world. As he drove me home in a car that moved with the silent grace of a panther, I saw him watching me in the rearview mirror. Clara, he said as we pulled up to my building, my name sounding different in his mouth, more intimate. You are not like the others. I didn't ask who the others were. I got out of the car and walked into my building without looking back, but I could feel his eyes on me until the door closed behind me. 3 weeks into my new arrangement, I had learned the rituals of entering Alessandro's world. The drive north from my neighborhood in the city, through progressively more affluent suburbs, until the urban grid gave way to the sprawling, manicured estates of the North Shore. The pause at the wrought iron gates of the DeLuca compound, where unseen cameras noted my arrival. The seamless transition from Clara Rossi, public school teacher and single mom, to Clara Rossi, private tutor to the heir of Chicago's criminal, would appreciate it. The book was a treasure. I handled it with reverence, settling into the large window seat that had become our designated spot. "Your papa has excellent taste," I said. "He says it's important to understand stories," Matteo replied, climbing up beside me. "He says they teach you how people think." As we worked on his reading comprehension, I could hear the low murmur of voices from Alessandro's study down the hall. Men speaking in rapid Italian, their tones low and serious. I caught stray words in English: shipments, territories, the Falcone problem. Fragments that served as a constant reminder of the true nature of this house. "Miss Clara?" Matteo's voice broke through my thoughts. "Why do you get a sad look on your face when Papa's friends are here?" His perception was startling. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "grown-ups have very serious work to talk about. It can sound scary even when it's not." "Papa's work is always serious," he said, with the simple acceptance of a child. "Uncle Marco says it's because he has to protect all of us." We were moving on to fractions when Alessandro appeared in the library doorway. I had become attuned to his presence, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that preceded his arrival. Today, however, he carried a tension that was palpable, a tightly coiled energy that made the air feel thin. "Matteo," he said, his voice soft but firm, "go find Sophia in the kitchen. I believe she was making your favorite cookies." Matteo's eyes lit up, but he hesitated, his gaze shifting between his father and me. He sensed the undertone, the adult anxiety we were trying to hide. "Is everything okay, Papa?" Alessandro's expression softened as he knelt to his son's level. "Everything is fine, little man. I just need to speak with Miss Clara about your lessons. Very boring grown-up talk." Once Matteo was gone, Alessandro's composure seemed to fray at the edges. He walked to the window, his back to me, staring out at the immaculate lawns. "There's a problem," he said, his voice flat. "You're in danger. Because of me." The raw emotion in his voice startling me. "Not because you work for me. Because you were kind to my son." We stared at each other across the vast, silent library. This was a crossroads. I could still walk away, back to my simple, safe life. "Elena," I said quietly. "Your wife. How did she die?" His face became a mask. "A car accident." "You told me she was killed." "The Falcones," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "They arranged the accident. Made it look random. She was on her way home from Matteo's preschool concert." His hands clenched into fists. "They killed her to send me a message. That they could take anyone I loved, at any time." His eyes met mine, filled with years of banked rage. "I will not let them do it again." Before I could process his words, the sound of shattering glass and screeching tires erupted from outside. A car alarm began to shriek. Men were shouting. The peaceful afternoon shattered into chaos. Alessandro was already moving, pulling me away from the window as he barked orders into a phone that had materialized in his hand. "Marco, status! Where is the boy?" The library door flew open and Marco rushed in, his face a grim mask of efficiency. "3 cars, automatic weapons. It's a probe, A show of force. Matteo is with Sofia in the safe room. The house is on lockdown. Alessandro nodded, then turned to me, his expression a mixture of command and apology. Clara, listen to me. Marco is taking you to a secure location. You do exactly as he says. Do you understand? What about you? I am going to end this. The words were spoken with a chilling finality. This was not anger. This was the promise of a man who had built an empire on decisive, lethal action. Alessandro, I said, his name feeling strange and intimate on my tongue. Be careful. Something shifted in his gaze. He stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat radiating from him. When this is over, he said, his voice low and intense, we are going to talk about what happened. Week, I paced its opulent rooms, a prisoner in a gilded cage. Marco had laid out the situation with stark clarity. The Falcone attack had been a test. Their intelligence suggested a more significant move was imminent. Until Alessandro neutralized the threat, I was to remain here. My son Leo was safe with Mrs. Gable, watched over by two of Alessandro's most trusted men, who were pretending to be utility workers. The separation was an agony, a constant, dull ache in my chest. The file arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a man who looked like he could snap me in two without breaking a sweat. Marco accepted it, his expression hardening as he read through the contents. He sat down across from me in the lavish living room, the city lights twinkling below us like a distant galaxy. Clara, he said, his voice gentle but firm. We need to talk about your parents. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. What about them? They were killed by a drunk driver 8 years ago. That was the official story. He slid the file across the marble coffee table. It was filled with police reports I'd never seen, witness statements that had been suppressed, and grainy photographs. My father's name appeared again and again, linked to high-stakes poker games run by the Falcone family. He gambled, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. He borrowed, Marco corrected softly, from Victor Falcone. When he couldn't pay, Falcone made an example of him. He tapped a photo of a severed brake line. This was his signature back then, a message to everyone else who owed him money. The room began to spin. Victor Falcone, the same man who was now hunting me. Alessandro knew, I said, the realization of bitter taste in my mouth. When he looked into me, he found this. He did, and he never told me. Betrayal was a sharp, physical pain. He let me get involved. He let me bring my son near this world, knowing my parents were murdered by the same people who killed his wife. He wanted to tell you, Marco said, his gaze steady. He argued with himself for days. But how do you tell someone that? How do you tell them their entire history is a lie, and that the confusing pull of attraction warred within me? I answered, What do you want? To see you, he said, his voice rough with an exhaustion I'd never heard before. To explain. Marco told me you know. He told me you've been lying to me since the day we met. I wasn't lying, Clara. I was protecting you. The truth couldn't change the past, but I was afraid it would destroy any chance of a future. We don't have a future. I'm your son's tutor, that's all. A heavy silence stretched between us. If that's all this is, he said finally, then why haven't you left? Why are you still in my safe house? Because my tiny apartment no longer felt like home. Because his world, for all its danger, had become the center of mine. I want to see my son, I said, dodging the question. Then come home, Clara. Home. The word struck me with the force of a physical blow. When had his fortress of a mansion started to feel like home? I can't trust you. Then trust this, he said, his voice dropping lower. I need you. Not just for Mateo, though. God knows he asks for you a dozen times a day. I need you. In a way I don't fully understand. In a way that has nothing to do with tutoring and everything to do with the fact that for the first time since Elena died, I feel something other than just surviving. The raw honesty in his voice cracked through my anger. This wasn't a calculated manipulation. This was a man stripped bare. Alessandro, I'm coming to get you. Don't! I need more time. You've had a week, he said softly. A week to decide if what's between us is worth fighting for. The line went dead. 40 minutes later, the hum of powerful engines rose from the street below. I watched from the window as Alessandro emerged from a black sedan, flanked by 2 new guards. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I murmured, his thumb brushing against my lips. Inconvenient, and possibly the most foolish thing I have ever allowed myself to feel. Before I could answer, his mouth was on mine. This kiss was nothing like the desperate one in the library. It was a slow, persuasive exploration, a silent plea that dismantled my defenses and left me breathless. When he pulled away, my hands were clenched in the fabric of his shirt, holding on as if he were my only anchor. Come home, Clara, he whispered against my lips. Come home and help me keep our boys safe. Help me figure out what this is between us. I wanted to surrender, to fall into his arms and let him carry me back to that dangerous, beautiful house. But the betrayal still stung. No more lies, I said, my voice trembling. No more secrets. If I come back, it has to be real. What's real, he said, his eyes boring into mine, is that I am falling in love with you, Clara Rossi. What's real is that if anything happens to you, I will burn this entire city to the ground. Love. The word hung between us, a shocking, impossible truth. And despite the lies, despite the danger, despite the fact that he was a man who solved problems with violence, I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I was falling for him too. One more chance, I heard myself say. But if you lie to me again, Alessandro, I walk away, and I will never look back. His smile was a mixture of relief and fierce promise. One more chance, he said, is all I need. The warehouse smelled of rust, decay, and the metallic tang of fear. I regained consciousness in fragments, my head throbbing, my wrists raw from the zip ties binding them behind me. In the darkness beside me, I could hear Mateo's terrified whimpers. Shh, sweetheart, I whispered, forcing a calm I didn't feel into my voice. I'm here. It's going to be okay. My eyes adjusted to the gloom. We were in a vast, cavernous space, an abandoned steel mill on the city's industrial south side. 3 men stood near the only door, their assault rifles held with casual, susceptible to doubt. Mateo, I whispered, so low only he could hear. Remember our tapping game? The secret codes? I need you to tap your foot against mine. A long one, then 3 short ones. Can you do that for me? Over and over. His small shoe found mine, and I felt the faint, rhythmic pressure. Long, short, short, short. V for Victor. Not SOS. Not something they might recognize. Something for Alessandro's surveillance to find. He had told me his teams could isolate and analyze patterned sounds. It was a desperate hope. Next, I addressed the men, using the firm, non-threatening tone I used for parent-teacher conferences. "Excuse me," I called out. "The boy needs some water." The leader looked over, surprised. "You're in no position to make demands." "I'm not demanding. I'm asking. He's 6 years old. Dehydration will make him sick, and a sick hostage is less valuable leverage. I'm sure your boss, Mr. Falcone, is a professional. He would expect you to maintain the asset." I was gambling on their pride, their desire to be seen as competent soldiers rather than clumsy thugs. It worked. The leader grunted and nodded to the youngest one. "Get them a bottle of water." Hours crawled by. The light outside faded from gray to black. Our captors grew more agitated. Their calls to their boss were apparently going unanswered. "Maybe DeLuca got to him first," the young one muttered. "Shut up," the leader hissed, but the seed of fear had been planted. "You know," I said conversationally, "Alessandro DeLuca is not a predictable man. Whatever plan Victor Falcone gave you, whatever timeline you're on, it's probably wrong." The leader glared at me. "What do you know about it?" "I know that you are sitting here with his son. Your boss is unreachable. And every minute that passes gives Alessandro's people another chance to find this location. Victor Falcone has a history of cutting his losses and abandoning his men when an operation, checking us for injuries with a desperate urgency. In the faint glow of an emergency light, his face was a mask of cold, terrifying fury. "Papa!" Matteo launched himself into his father's arms, finally letting his terror pour out in great, gulping sobs. Alessandro held his son tightly with one arm, his other hand cupping my face, his thumb stroking away tears I hadn't realized I was shedding. "You're safe," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. "You're both safe." He helped me to my feet, his arm wrapping around my waist, holding me steady. "How did you find us?" I asked. "The tapping," Marco answered, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Matteo's foot. We isolated a V pattern in the ambient audio and triangulated the source." I looked at the small boy sobbing in his father's arms, my heart swelling with pride and love. He had been so brave. In the car, driving away from that place of death and fear, Matteo fell asleep between us. Alessandro's hand found mine, his fingers lacing through mine with a desperate strength. "Clara," he said, his voice low and raw. "I can't live like this. I can't spend the rest of my life waiting for the next attack, wondering if the people I love are safe." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that building this empire cost me my first wife. It almost cost me my son, and it almost cost me you. No empire is worth that." He turned to me, his eyes burning with intensity in the dark. "Marry me, Clara. Not just to be my wife, but to be my partner. Help me tear down the old world and build something new. Something legitimate. Something worthy of you and our sons." Looking at this powerful, dangerous man, who was willing to dismantle his entire world for the chance at a peaceful life with me, I knew my answer. "Yes," I whispered. "Let's build something new." His kiss wasn't desperate or claiming this time. It tasted of homecoming, of promises, and of a future I had never dared to imagine. 18 months later, I stood by the window of our home on the North Shore, my hand resting on the gentle swell of my belly. He said, pulling a chair beside his. "We're finalizing the plans for the new Bridgeport Elementary campus." The architectural drawings spread across the desk showed a state-of-the-art school, complete with a new library, a technology lab, and a fully staffed counseling center specializing in childhood trauma. It was my project, my way of giving back to the community I'd come from, funded by the man who had taken me from it. "It's beautiful," I said, tracing the lines of the new playground. His hand covered mine. "Your old principal is calling it a miracle." Later that evening, after the architects had left, Alessandro pulled me into his arms. "I have some news," he said, his lips brushing my hair. "The Justice Department officially closed their investigation this morning. No charges, no further surveillance. We're clean, Clara. We're free." I looked up at him, searching his face. "Any regrets?" I asked softly. "About leaving the old life behind?" "Never," he said, his voice full of conviction. "I don't miss being a man who had to rule through fear. I don't miss being someone you couldn't trust." He led me to the window where we could see Matteo, now a confident 8-year-old, teaching a 5-year-old Leo how to kick a soccer ball across the vast lawn. They were brothers in every way that mattered. Matteo had started calling me Mama months ago, the word slipping out so naturally it had made me weep. "He's been asking when his little sister will be here to play with them," Alessandro murmured, his hand coming to rest on my belly. "What should we name her?" I asked. "I was thinking Elena," he said quietly, "after her grandmother." The gesture, honoring the wife he had lost while embracing the future we were building, filled my throat with emotion. "Elena Clara De Luca," I said, testing the name. "I love it." We stood there for a long time, watching our sons play in the fading light. The rain that had brought a terrified little boy into my life now felt like a blessing. A storm that had washed away 2 broken pasts and cleared the way for a future I could never have imagined.